Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere dry, dusty, and wildly underrated. No, not your uncle's backyard shed. We're talking ancient Mesopotamia. Picture this. The sky is a pale gold over the ziggurat at UR. The air still warm from the day, and the clay beneath your bare feet is cracked like a broken plate someone forgot to clean up after a 3,000-year-old dinner. You're not wearing much, just a linen tunic, a belt, and a mild sense of existential dread. Don't worry, that's normal here. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love seeing where these sleepy stories wander. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're in the city of UR, which, despite the short name, is surprisingly tall in the middle, thanks to its massive ziggurat. It looms like a stairway for very determined goats or slightly confused gods. You're not a priest, a warrior, or a king. You're one of the many. You work, you trade, you try to keep track of stuff, like how many jars of grain you owe to the neighbor, or whether that goat you swapped for firewood actually belonged to your cousin. Whoops. See, before there were receipts, there was just arguing, heated discussions in the marketplace, shrugging, eyebrow raises. Lots of, I definitely gave you that already followed by you definitely didn't. Imagine trying to run a whole city like that. And yet somehow they did. Until someone, let's call them extremely tired of repeating themselves, decided there had to be a better way. Enter proto-accounting. But don't expect spreadsheets or spreadsheets' ancient cousin, papyrus. No, the first receipts came in the form of clay tokens. These weren't casual poker chips. They were shaped to represent real things. Cones for grain, balls for animals, little cylinders for textiles. You'd gather them up, put them in a hollow clay ball called a bulla, seal it, and hand it over. Voila! Proof of transaction, if you had the patience to break it open. You hold one now in your hand. It's surprisingly weighty. Inside are 6 tokens, which, if you're not terrible at math, and most Mesopotamians weren't, means someone owes you 6 goats, or jugs of beer, or baskets of barley. You can't exactly peek inside to remind yourself, though. So, yeah, efficient? Not quite yet. That's when the real game changer happened. Instead of putting the tokens inside the bulla, someone genius decided to just press them into the outside of clay tablet. Boom! Visual record. No smashing required. This seemingly small shift is the ancestor of every receipt, invoice, and sorry, no refund without proof of purchase you've ever known. You're starting to get into it now. You and a few others even get tapped by a temple priest to help manage transactions. Not because you're charming, you're not, but because you have legible handwriting, or well, neat wedge marks. Cuneiform isn't pretty, but it sticks around. Still, there's an odd moment when you realize just how far this city will go to track its stuff. You sit beside the temple steps, watching traders come and go. You see jars counted, sheep tallied, even kisses recorded. That's not a joke. There's a debate among historians about whether some early tablets tracked rations or romantic liaisons, or both. Historians still argue whether Mesopotamian records reflected only economic transactions, or the messy web of personal lives, too. But back to you. You stretch your legs and glance at the sky. The stars are out. You wonder if someone's invented a receipt for time, for lost hours, for promises not quite kept. You chuckle. Probably not, but give them a few centuries. The ziggurat glows faintly behind you, moonlight glancing off its steps. Below, the city winds down, but even in the hush, you know the numbers are still moving. Somewhere, someone is pressing a stylus into wet clay, capturing a moment, preserving a trade, trying to make the ephemeral stick. You yawn. It's been a long day of counting, of remembering, of gently arguing over sheep tallies with people who swear it was 3, not 5. You tuck the tablet under your arm, pat it like it's a loyal dog, and start walking home. Tomorrow, you'll be back at the temple. There'll be more tablets, more symbols, more people who forget they borrowed your ox. But for now, you rest, in a city of record keepers, in the cradle of civilization, in the place where receipts were born. Out of necessity, clay and a very human desire to remember what matters. You wake to the clatter of hooves and the gentle, rhythmic groan of a cart wheel stuck in a rut. Someone's shouting about lentils again. It's early. The sun hasn't even bothered to rise properly, but already the city is alive with bartering, barbs, and breakfast arguments. And of course, one recurring theme. You promised me 2 goats, not 1.5. This, you've come to accept, is Mesopotamian morning music. Your first stop is the granary. Not because you're hungry. Though the scent of warm flatbread wafting from a nearby oven is rude at best, but because the temple wants a barley count. Again, the high priest insists someone's been skimming grain. You're not pointing fingers, but the rats around here do look unusually well fed. So you start counting. Barley bags lined up like sleepy soldiers. You scratch a quick note into your clay tablet, stylus in hand. The tool is simple, just a wedge-shaped stick. But with it, you become both accountant and historian, bureaucrat and bard. 1 stroke for 1 measure. 2 strokes for 2. A triangle? That might mean lentils, or possibly donkey. It's not always clear, and that's the problem. See, the barter system worked fine when the world was small. When you could just walk over, make a face, hold up a fish, and walk away with a chunk of meat. But once villages grew into cities, and cities turned into networks, memory stopped being enough. I gave you the sheep last week turns into did you, though. And let's be honest, you're not keeping mental tabs on who owes whom, what when you're also trying not to get trampled by a runaway ox cart. Enter receipts. Real, tangible, hard to argue with proof. But they didn't spring into existence overnight. Like everything else, they started small and a little weird. Long before the neat cuneiform rose you right today, there were tokens. Simple shapes, each representing a different item. A cone for a standard measure of grain. A sphere for an animal. A disc for oil. One of your favorite fringe theories claims that the earliest token makers may have been potters who just got really into symbolic art and couldn't stop shaping random items in codes. Some historians roll their eyes. Others nod sagely. Historians still argue whether these tokens were developed purely for trade or had some magical, ritualistic origin too. You once saw a trader use a token like a charm, kissing it before sealing it in clay. Superstition? Maybe. But that goat he received in exchange looked pretty healthy. Back then, people stored tokens in little containers, bully, sealed with their personal mark or stamp. They'd hand the whole clay ball over like a trust capsule. But there was a flaw. If someone needed to verify the contents, they had to smash the bulla open. Not exactly reusable, or subtle. Kind of like writing someone a note by carving it into a coconut. So then came a next leap. Why not press the tokens into the clay's surface instead? It sounds obvious now, but to them, it was radical. A revolution in thought. A shift from things to symbols of things. From memory to meaning. From trade to trust. You're sitting now beneath a fig tree, finishing your latest transaction tablet. You've recorded an exchange of 2 measures of grain, 1 amphora of date wine, and a slightly irritated goat. The goat keeps trying to eat the edge of your tablet. You gently push its face away. There's a woman beside you, older, clever, with a smirk that says she's seen too many things and written them all down. She leans over your shoulder. You put the wrong wedge for grain, she says. You frown. That's barley. It's goat fodder if you don't fix it. You sigh, scrape it off, and repress the proper mark. Writing in clay has its perks. Edits are possible, if a little messy. But accuracy is everything now. These aren't just records. They're promises baked into earth. And that matters. Because if someone shows up tomorrow claiming you owe them more than you remember, this little slab is your only protection. The older scribe, her name is Iltani, tells you about a case from last week. A man claimed his neighbor owed him 2 jugs of olive oil. The neighbor swore he'd already paid. They brought the tablet to the temple. It showed 1 jug, not 2. Guess who had to bring more oil? You raise an eyebrow. What if someone lies on the tablet? Iltani grins. Then someone better have stronger handwriting or better friends. It's a joke. Kind of, but you get her point. In a world without cameras, fingerprints, or receipts that email themselves, the clay carries the weight of truth. Even when it bends, You pat your tablet and head back toward the temple. Someone shouts about lentils again. Someone else drops a basket of onions and mutters a word you hope isn't divine. The city of Ur hums with the business of living, and now with the business of recording that life. One wedge at a time. You find your spot near the storeroom and place your tablet on the drying rack. Later, it'll be baked in the sun, permanently preserved. One more mark in the ever-growing clay archive of civilization. You wonder what future eyes will make of it, if they'll laugh at your spelling, if they'll puzzle over your abbreviation for mildly hostile goat. You stretch. The day is still young. The sheep still need tallying, and someone's bound to argue over lentils again. But at least this time, you've got receipts. You duck into the shade of a half-crumbling mud brick wall, the only cool place left in the heat-soaked afternoon. Your stylus is tucked behind your ear. Yes, it's clay, and yes, that hurts a little, but it's the price of looking official. The sun is brutal today, but so is the granary supervisor, and she insists all the barley counts be cross-checked before dinner. You're joined by a junior scribe, fresh from temple training and full of confidence. He's holding a sealed bulla, smooth and pale and round as a river stone. It's from the goat herd, he says, beaming like he just invented writing himself. You blink. Why didn't he just write a tablet? The kid shrugs, said this felt more private. You nod. You've heard that before. It's strange how preferences persist even when new methods appear. Despite how much easier it is to press the token impressions directly onto a tablet, some still insist on using the old-fashioned clay spheres. Maybe it's superstition, maybe it's a need for secrecy, or maybe it's just that people love sealing things, literally stamping them closed. There's something satisfying about pressing a personal seal into wet clay, watching your identity become part of the object. A name, a symbol, a story. You remember the first time you got your own seal. It was a gift from an elder scribe who had watched you scribble crooked lines on a broken roof tile. It was a simple design, an eagle and a barley stalk. Not exactly intimidating, but meaningful. You're a watcher, he'd said, and a feeder. You weren't sure what that meant, but it sounded flattering. Seals are everywhere now, not just on bully, but on contracts, ration tablets, even on envelopes holding letters. Yes, letters. You once helped draft one to a trader in Lagash about a delayed shipment of reeds. The recipient never replied. Apparently, reed delays weren't scandalous enough to warrant a response. You sit beside the boy now, watching him roll the bulla between his palms. Do you know what's in it? You ask. He frowns. 2 goat tokens, 1 jar token, and I think a cone. Barley. You nod. Probably rations. He holds the ball up to the light, like he's expecting to see through it. You laugh. The earliest receipts, it turns out, were more trust exercises than documents. If someone told you the bulla had 6 cones and 2 spheres inside, you just had to believe them. Unless, of course, you were willing to break it open in front of the temple scribes. In which case, congratulations, you've just started Mesopotamia's first official audit. That's why tablets took off. Once people realized they could press the tokens into a flat surface and bake the whole thing like yesterday's leftover bread, it changed everything. Now the information was visible. Belmanon, and no goats were harmed in the verifying of this transaction. You glance back toward the temple. Smoke curls lazily from the cook fires. Somewhere, someone is singing off-key about lentils again. The same tune as this morning, but with more flair. You think about how far this has all come. Once upon a time, people bartered items and counted with fingers or pebbles. Now there are temples with archives, shelves full of clay slabs that track who borrowed what and when. There's even a growing vocabulary to cover it all. Terms for fractions, ownership, even penalties for late returns. You've seen a tablet that fined a man 10 additional measures of barley for missing a delivery deadline. That's a lot of soup. Historians still argue whether Mesopotamian writing began for economic purposes or if it served spiritual, even magical, functions from start. But down here in the dust and heat, among lentils and livestock, it feels pretty clear this is about memory, about fairness, about not having to argue over goats for the 100th time. A commotion pulls your attention. A woman marches past, red-faced, a cracked tablet in her hand. That scribe wrote 2 measures instead of 3, she shouts. The crowd parts. The scribe in question, old, tired, and halfway through lunch, rises with the expression of someone who's seen too many angry clients and too few accurate styluses. You quietly turn away. Not your circus, not your clay tablet, but as you walk toward the record hall, you feel a strange warmth beyond the 110-degree sun. A satisfaction, maybe, because even with errors and tempers and the occasional fraud, what you're doing matters. You're capturing proof. You glance at your latest work, still drying on the clay rack. It records the transfer of goods from one merchant to another. 3 amphorae of fish oil and 1 jar of date honey. The seal at the bottom is new, an apprentice's first stamp. A little wonky, a little smudged, but it's there. You smile, because even if the apprentice messes up the math, the mark remains. And that's the power of these receipts. Not just what they say, but that they were said at all. That someone, somewhere, made the effort to record what happened. Tomorrow, you'll scratch new marks in a clay, new trades, new names, maybe even a new kind of symbol. But for now, as the sun begins its slow descent and the scent of lentil stew thickens the air, you sit back and rest your sore fingers. You've earned it. 1 token, 1 tablet, 1 transaction at a time. The clay feels warm against your fingers, sun-baked, but still soft enough to take a clean impression. You press your stylus in with care, tilting it slightly so the wedge comes out crisp. Another record made. Another little slice of life set in stone. Literally. You look down at your half-finished tablet and marvel at how normal this has all become. Just a few seasons ago, you were still arguing about goat trades with nothing but a witness and a good memory. Now, if someone even tries to deny a debt, you simply reach for the tablet rack and hand them their own handwriting. That part never gets old. Today, you're working near the temple storehouses, helping to finalize rations for the workers who maintain the ziggurat. These aren't casual transactions anymore. They're serious logistics. Barley for laborers, beer for builders, fish for foremen. It all gets counted, recorded, and stamped. It's not glamorous work, but someone has to make sure 2 jugs of barley beer per day doesn't become, oops, I drank it all. You're joined by a colleague who smirks as he drops a fresh bundle of wet clay in front of you. More delivery records. Temple's trying to track every fishtail and date pit now. You raise an eyebrow. Next, they'll want signatures. You both laugh, but actually they kind of do. Seals are already personal. Some are so elaborate, they're basically ancient ID cards. You've seen some carved with lions, scorpions, even scenes of men wrestling bulls. Yours still shows the eagle and barley. Not flashy, but reliable. As you work, a thought keeps nibbling at the edge of your focus. Why do these records matter so much? Why are so many people suddenly obsessed with writing everything down? One theory, whispered over lukewarm barley porridge and stale bread, is that writing doesn't just record reality, it creates it. That once something is pressed into clay, it becomes true. And if that sounds mystical, well, maybe it is. Historians still argue whether Mesopotamian scribes saw themselves as recorders of fact or shapers of it. You've certainly seen moments where someone produces a questionable tablet, and suddenly, the argument ends. There's something about seeing it in writing, even if you don't like what it says. Still, the shift from tokens to tablets wasn't just about truth. It was also about efficiency. You remember the first time you saw a merchant refuse a bulla. Too much hassle, he said. Give me the flat one. He pointed at a tablet, where the goods were listed, the date included, and a temple seal stamped with flair. You picked it up, turned it over. It was neat, clear, unambiguous. No smashing required. The tablet told you everything you needed to know, and even a little extra. Like how the scribe had drawn an accidental line through one wedge and tried to cover it with an awkward fish symbol. Happens to the best of us. It was then you realized tablets were the future. But with that future came more than receipts. You started seeing new kinds of inscriptions, lists, prayers, even poems. Some scribes began experimenting, stretching the script beyond simple math and trade. A girl you know, smart as a whip, barely old enough to wear a work belt. once handed you a tablet filled with made-up words and little drawings of goats and hats. You asked her what it was. A receipt, she said. For laughter. You still have that one tucked away in your pouch. Not everything in this world needs a purpose, but even the silly things are rooted in something bigger. The idea that thoughts can be preserved, that memory can be baked and kept. You finish your current tablet, sit on the rack beside the others, and wipe your hands on your tunic. Dust clings to your skin, to your nose, to your hair. You swear the temple stores more dust than grain some days. A caravan arrives, just in time to interrupt your peace. Donkeys loaded with oil jars, flax, and something suspiciously smelly wrapped in reed mats. You step forward, tablet in hand, ready to record the goods. One of the traders eyes you warily. Can't we just tell you? You smile sweetly. You could. Pause. But I won't remember. He sighs and starts unloading. The process is slow, measured. You count each item aloud, mark it down, double-check it with the storehouse keeper. The trader mutters under his breath. You pretend not to hear. But by the end of it, he signs with his seal, watches you dry the tablet, and nods in reluctant approval. It's not flashy. It's not dramatic. But it's fair. And fairness, you realize, is the real invention here. Clay tablets didn't just simplify trade, they leveled the playing field. When everyone has access to the same system of records, power gets distributed. Arguments shift from shouting matches to documentation reviews. And while it's far from perfect, you've seen plenty of accidental errors. It's a step towards something better. Even now, you can feel things changing. More people are learning to write. More traders expect receipts. More children are playing with clay, like it's a game. And in doing so, learning the foundations of history, economy, and maybe even poetry. You lean back, stretching your arms. The sun's getting low. Shadows stretch across the courtyard, reaching toward the temple steps. You glance at the drying tablets, each one a moment captured. A jar delivered, a debt repaid, a promise made real. And for just a second, you imagine them thousands of years from now, dug up by strangers who speak languages you've never heard, who live in cities you can't picture. And they'll read your marks, your numbers, your name. Not bad for a day's work. You're ankle deep in barley again, not metaphorically, actually standing in a storage pit, helping tally the daily ration count for ziggurat workers. It's hot, it's itchy, and someone just sneezed directly into the grain pile. You pause, make a mental note to avoid that side, and keep counting. The scribe life isn't always glamorous. Beside you, a young assistant juggles a damp clay tablet and an impatient temple official barking out numbers. The assistant fumbles a symbol, curses under his breath, and wipes the slate clean, literally. That's the beauty of wet clay. It forgives. To a point. You squint at your own tablet, rechecking your math. The grain stacks up fast. Half a measure per worker per day. Multiply by 50. Subtract what went to the kitchen. Add what went missing, probably to rats or accidental pocket scoops. You sigh. No wonder your dreams lately involve counting wedges. It occurs to you, standing there in the barley bath, that what you're doing is more than just logistics. It's a kind of performance. Because every wedge mark you press in a clay isn't just a number, it's a statement. A message from you to anyone reading it. This happened. And it happened here. And it happened now. You didn't invent this role, but you're part of a long and surprisingly respected line of ancient accountants. And trust me, these folks were no joke. The Mesopotamians didn't just dabble in record keeping. They mastered it. Their scribes tracked everything from temple donations to livestock trades to beer consumption down to the last jug. They built entire bureaucracies with nothing but styluses and sun-baked clay. You once visited a temple archive. An entire room-packed floor to ceiling with tablets. It was like walking into a forest of forgotten receipts. Rows of shelves, each lined with names, dates, commodities. You ran your fingers over the clay, tracing grooves made by people long gone. It felt strangely intimate. Some tablets were organized by goods, others by year. One wall was dedicated entirely to irregular trades, which mostly translated to somebody goofed. You helped organize that section once. One tablet read, one goat delivered, two promised. Goat was angry. You still wonder what happened to that goat. And here's the thing. Nobody expected writing to become what it did. Most of the earliest cuneiform wasn't literature or poetry. It was accounting. Cold, practical, necessary. Historians still argue whether Sumerian scribes truly viewed writing as a sacred art or simply as a job. But the fact that they trained for years, learned hundreds of symbols, and lived next door to temples, that says something. Maybe not sacred, but certainly essential. Your own training was no cakewalk. You remember the first time you tried to write 10 sheep received. You accidentally wrote 10 snakes regretted. Not a popular record, not a popular lunch break either. But over time, it gets easier. Your hand learns the rhythm. Your brain learns the codes. And soon you're writing not just for clarity, but with style. Take the senior scribe in your district, for example. He signs every tablet with a little swirl beneath his seal. Not necessary, entirely extra, but people trust it. It's his brand. Even in clay, reputations matter. You climb out of the barley pit, brushing off your feet and checking for stray weevils. Your tablet is done, weights tallied, names recorded, seal pressed. Another successful transaction locked in the dirt. Nearby, someone yells. You turn. A man is waving a broken tablet, gesturing wildly. This said I owed 3 measures. I paid 4. You walk over, notebook in hand. He's sweating, angry. His beard is covered in flour. You listen. You nod. You check the original entry. Yep, 3 measures. His version says 4, but it's smudged, hasty, and half-dried. Tampered? Maybe. That's the problem with clay. Truth is in the pressure. If a symbol's been repressed, it shows. A trained eye can spot it. You bring the 2 tablets side by side. One is clean, neat, pressed with a practiced hand. The other's wonky, sloppy. The wedge marks bend like reeds in a windstorm. You point it out. Yours is newer. He opens his mouth, pauses, then sighs. I thought it was worth a try. You don't scold him. You just rewrite the original receipt, include a note on the attempted revision, and log it into the irregular trade archive. One more goat-related drama for the ages. As you return to your seat, a thought lingers. This work isn't flashy. It won't win you fame. You'll never be immortalized in temple hymns. But in a world where memory fades and voices lie, you bring order. With every tablet, every mark, every tally, you say this matters. And that's enough. The sun is setting now, casting long shadows over the marketplace. You hear the soft murmur of traders packing up, the clip-clop of donkeys headed home. A breeze stirs dust across the stones. You pick up your stylus one last time, scratch out tomorrow's to-do list on a bit of scrap clay. Check fish inventory, count temple bread, avoid angry goat, guy you smile. Another day in Mesopotamia. Another set of receipts pressed, dried, and ready to whisper across centuries. You're in the middle of a loud, sticky morning. The kind where the air clings to your skin and your sandals pick up half the road as you walk. Market day, and you are. It's chaos as usual. You dodge a runaway child, sidestep a merchant shouting about figs, and weave between 2 women arguing over whether their goat cheese is cursed. You didn't ask. You don't want to know. Your destination? The temple's open-air office, a dusty wooden table under an awning strung with reeds. This is where the real business gets done. The receipts of the city written, reviewed, and resolved. You take your seat, unroll your stylus pouch, and place a stack of half-dried tablets beside you. A man steps forward. He's got the look, tired, sweaty, eyes already bracing for disappointment. Name? You ask, not looking up yet. Esherim, he says. Delivery from Kish. You find the tablet he's referring to, marked with a seal that looks suspiciously like a lopsided fish, and read aloud. 2 carts of brick clay, 1 bundle of straw, for jugs of fish oil, delivered on the 13th day of the new moon. Esherim nods rapidly. That's me. You squint at the oil jugs. They're dented. One's leaking. You frown. There were 5 jugs last time. He blinks. Must have evaporated. You pause. Fish oil doesn't evaporate. It does if you believe. You sigh, press the correction onto a fresh tablet, and move on. This is the part of writing no one talks about. The edits, the disputes, the fine line between cleverness and fraud. Not all tablets are perfect. Some are disputed, some are suspicious, and some are imaginative. One time, you found a receipt that listed 1 goat, 0 regrets. You're still not sure what that trade was about, but you admire the optimism. A colleague beside you, tarry, fast-talking and sharp-eyed, leans over and mutters, "Want to see something weird?" Of course you do. He pulls out a tablet from a foreign trader. It's written in cuneiform, sure, but the style is off. The wedges are upside down in places. There's an extra loop here, a reversed mark there. It looks like someone learning to write with their elbows. What language is this, you ask? Tarshrugis. Elamite? Maybe early Akkadian? Or maybe it's just art. You laugh, but it makes you think. Historians still argue whether the spread of cuneiform was top-down, temples training scribes and exporting the system, or bottom-up, with merchants adapting the script on the fly, inventing shortcuts and symbols as needed. Either way, what's clear is that writing traveled. It moved with trade. It spread with goods. It evolved as it went. And evolution means variation. Even now, as you handle tablets from far-flung places, Susa, Eridu, Lagash, you see differences. Some prefer straight lines. Others add decorative flourishes. One particularly wild tablet from Mari used pictographs and cuneiform, like someone couldn't decide between emoji and full sentences. Back at your desk, the morning rush slows. You check your latest entries. The inkless bureaucracy of a clay empire. These aren't just receipts, they're fragments of communication systems. And every tablet tells you not just what was traded, but how people thought, how they argued, how they lied. You recall a fringe theory you once heard, that cuneiform might have been the first form of sarcasm. One symbol that meant sheep, another that meant Yerite. It's ridiculous, but then again, you've definitely seen tablets written with a little too much flair. You shuffle your stack. Time for the afternoon file check. This part is meditative. You sit in the shade, reading through past trades, deliveries of wine, allocations of temple bread, fines for missed offerings. One tablet details a marriage contract. Yes, a marriage contract. It includes rations, living arrangements, and what happens if the groom forgets to feed the wife's goats. Spoiler, it's a fine and public shame. You smile, because it hits you again. How receipts, once used for barley and beans, are now tracking lives. Love, promises, failures. The world is still small, mostly dirt and brick and goat hair. But the reach of clay is wide. Its grip is strong, because people want to remember. And more than that, they want to be remembered. A child walks past your desk, peeking at your tablet. He squints. That one says, "Donkey eats fish?" You glance down. No, it says 5 amphorae of fish oil delivered by donkey. He shrugs. Mine's better. Honestly, he's not wrong. It's moments like this, humor, surprise, human error, that remind you receipts aren't just dry lists. They're stories. Every mark has a motive. Every line has a witness. Even if it's just you, the sun, and a smudged tablet in the dust. You lean back, tablet in hand, watching a pair of traders haggle over a cracked jug. You already know how this ends. One of them will storm over in an hour, demanding a new tablet. The other will claim the crack was already there. You'll settle it with a quick impression, a neutral tone, and the tired gravitas of someone who's written more about barley than poetry. But in a way, it is poetry. Just crunchy. Your hand aches. Your tunic smells like fish oil. But your records are clean, your seal is strong, and your stylus still fits snug behind your ear. You are a scribe of the receipts. And this is your empire. The ziggurat casts a long shadow over the city as the afternoon wears on, and you find yourself tucked inside one of the cool side chambers of the temple archive. Shelves upon shelves of tablets surround you, some stacked neatly in rows, others haphazardly dumped in baskets like they were barley sacks instead of Mesopotamia's proudest invention. You're not alone in here. Tari is with you again, snorting softly at an especially dramatic complaint tablet from a brickmaker. You peek over his shoulder. He claimed his bricks melted in the rain. Thought shrugs. Maybe they did. You raise an eyebrow. He blamed demons. Another shrug. Can you prove it wasn't demons? Touché. You return to your own pile. Old trade tablets awaiting updates. Not glamorous work, but important. Someone has to go back through the records and note when goods have actually been delivered. Promises scratched into clay are one thing. Follow-through is another. Today, you're updating a tablet from 3 moons ago. It details a shipment of flax to a woman named Inanazuma. Her mark is on the seal, spiraling waves meant to represent river reeds. Beautiful work, not standard temple issue, which means she's either wealthy or just really into aesthetics. You press the new impressions in. Flax received, processed, 2 bales missing, likely due to theft or spoilage. You log it and place it carefully into the resolved basket. These are the moments when the tablet stops being potential and becomes history. And that, you think, is one of the weirdest things about your job. You're writing the past before it finishes happening, anticipating outcomes, betting on reality, hoping the barley shows up before the priest starts shouting. Historians still argue whether this era of writing was truly about literature, or if that's a modern invention we've retrofitted onto ancient ledgers. But you've read some of the longer tablets, wills, treaties, coded messages carved so subtly into trade logs that you wouldn't notice them unless you knew. There's something poetic in that. Of course, poetry won't pay for lentils. So back to the ledgers. Across the room, 2 novices are whispering over a cracked tablet. It says 10 donkeys, one insists. No, it says 1 donkey, the other corrects. The wedge is faded. You step over. It says no donkeys. You pause. The rest of the tablet explains why. You read the passage aloud. Promised 10 donkeys. None arrived. Cinder claims donkeys turned against him and ran into the marsh. Tari howls with laughter. You just nod. Classic marsh mutiny. Even in this ancient office, the chaos of the world leaks through. You've recorded claims of stolen bricks, spoiled wine, goat bites, moldy scrolls, claim melted by floodwater, and one unfortunate man who tried to pay his taxes in hugs. Didn't go well. But that's the thing. Every receipt is an artifact of trust, or more often mistrust. People want proof. They want protection. They want to point to a tablet and say, see, I'm not the liar here. It's comforting in a strange way. A few weeks ago, a foreign trader passed through, speaking hurried Akkadian and holding a tablet so old it crumbled at the corners. It recorded a land deal from decades ago. So old that half the scribes in the temple archive had to squint just to recognize the script. But it held up. The marks were clear. The seal was authentic. The land in question was still uncultivated, and the trader left with his portion returned. All because a chunk of dirt said so. You remember staring at that tablet, marveling that clay, fragile, dull, heavy, could outlast shouting matches, shifting governments, even time itself. You once heard a fringe theory that Mesopotamian scribes considered their tablets a form of immortality. That if your name lived in the clay, you never truly vanished. You like that, and honestly, you believe it. Because sometimes when you press your seal into wet earth, you feel like you're whispering to someone thousands of years away. Someone with strange clothes and stranger words who picks up your tablet, tilts it to the light, and wonders who you were. You were here. You wrote this. You mattered. The light in the archive starts to shift. Evening approaches. You log the last of the trade updates and place the final tablet on the shelf, careful not to jostle the others. There's a satisfying clack as it fits into place. Another transaction closed. Another voice preserved. You stand and stretch. Clay dust falls from your sleeves like powder. You'll need to rinse your hands in the fountain before dinner. Again, as you leave the archive, you glance back once more. Row after row of names, trades, arguments, receipts. Not just data, echoes. You walk into the pink light of dusk, stylus still tucked behind your ear, already thinking about tomorrow's records. And who'll come asking for them? You start the next morning with a headache and a half-dried smear of barley porridge on your tunic. Not ideal, but the temple bell is ringing, the scribes are assembling, and somewhere in the courtyard, a donkey is screaming like it's been denied a promotion. Another day in Mesopotamia. Your first task? Disputes. Again, the temple's magistrate has asked you and two other scribes to review a case. A worker claims he was shorted on his grain payment, and his overseer insists he's lying. You sit in a shaded alcove, back to the sun, flipping through tablets. One reads, 5 days labor, 1 measure barley per day, paid 3. Another reads, laborer refused to finish roof, barley reduced. You frown. You've seen this pattern before. It's part of the great tradition of adjusted receipts. Someone tweaks a number. Someone forgets an extra bundle. Someone invents a reason to justify a missing payment. And in the middle of it all, you, stylus in hand, trying to decode truth from hardened mud. You lean back and sigh. Tari, seated beside you, sips warm beer from a clay cup and raises an eyebrow. Let me guess, someone accidentally ate the records again. Worse, you mutter. Both tablets are real. But one has a different date. Same transaction, 2 versions. He grins. Time travel fraud. You don't laugh. Not because it's not funny, but because this kind of thing is happening more often. You're in the middle of what scholars will one day call the bureaucratic boom. Every week, more people are learning to read. More clerks are getting styluses. More temples are requiring three copies of every trade agreement. It's the golden age of redundancy. And while it helps with disputes, it also means more versions of everything. Historians still argue whether this explosion in tablet production was the start of true administration or just a highly advanced way to shuffle problems into neat piles. Either way, you're drowning in receipts. And yet, beneath the overwhelm, you feel something else brewing. Patterns. You begin to notice how certain phrases pop up again and again. In accordance with temple law, to be delivered by next moon, with the seal of, it's the beginning of legal language, the early backbone of contracts. You try to explain it once to a teenager who wants to become a scribe. She asks if you enjoy it. You think, then say, it's like taming dust. She blinks. You hand her a stylus. Try it. She does. Her first symbol is wobbly. The next, stronger. By the third, she's smiling. Later, you walk through the city square. People are everywhere. Vendors shouting, children chasing dogs, priests chanting by the fountain. But what catches your eye is a stone wall near the edge of the market. Someone has carved a tablet into it. Not placed one on it, carved into it. It's a warning. Thieves will return double what they take. May and Lil see y'all. It's crude, jagged, possibly illegal, but it's also brilliant. Public accountability in stone. You trace the grooves with your finger. There's power here. Writing is no longer limited to dusty shelves. It's creeping into daily life. Walls, doors, markets. The world is becoming a living ledger. You return to the temple feeling a little dizzy. It hits you then. This is how laws begin. Not with kings, not with declarations, but with receipts that slowly start sounding less like math and more like morals. 2 goats borrowed, 1 not returned, 1 fight, 1 injury, 1 fine, 1 story carved into clay and remembered forever. That evening, you're asked to assist with a new initiative, the 3-tablet system. 1 for the temple, 1 for the trader, 1 sealed and stored with a neutral third party, usually a priest with a suspiciously large tablet cabinet. You press your seal into all 3 copies and joke that you're going to need stronger wrists. The priest doesn't laugh. You don't blame him. He's holding 6 of those cabinets already. You walk home by moonlight, stylus tapping against your belt. You think about the worker who got shorted today, about the overseer who lied, about how the truth is now frozen in 3 directions, impossible to erase, and about how, for better or worse, writing is watching. You pass a group of children near the well, carving circles into the dirt with sticks. One shouts, "I made a tablet." Another adds symbols and claims it's a tax notice. They're giggling, but they're also learning. You smile. You lie back later under the stars, head on a bundle of papyrus scrolls that smell faintly of fish and sweat. You look up at the sky and whisper, "May my receipts survive the flood." Because if this keeps growing, This mountain of clay, this jungle of inkless law. You know what's coming next. Courts, rules, government. Whole cities made not just of brick, but of promises written down and sealed in time. And someone, some tired, dusty, sarcastic scribe like you, is going to be the one making it happen. One wedge at a time. The day begins with the sound of your name being mispronounced by a palace official. Firumbek. You blink mid-bite of breakfast, some questionable lentil paste on flatbread, and wipe your hands on your tunic. That's close. He squints at his clay tablet. You are the scribe who logs oil deliveries? Among other things, you reply, already regretting the interaction. He gestures dramatically. Good. You need it at the Palace Records Hall. Bring your styluses. And patience. Great. By mid-morning, you're standing beneath high arches and sunlit windows, staring at what can only be described as a bureaucratic avalanche. The palace has decided to standardize all temple-to-palace transactions. Not in theory, not someday. Now, rows of scribes are hunched over low tables. The air is thick with clay dust and tension. At the center of the room stands a young official holding a tablet that, frankly, looks like it was carved by a goat. He raises it like a proclamation. This, he says grandly, is the new format. You look, it has columns. Columns. On a tablet. 3 categories. Item, quantity, verified seal. It's tidy. It's symmetrical. It's about to ruin your life. You take your seat, exchange a grim look with Tari, and start converting yesterday's records into this new system. Fish deliveries, flour rations, bundles of reeds, it all has to be rewritten. You reach the 5th tablet before realizing something terrifying. You kind of like it. The columns make things easier to scan. The symmetry pleases your brain. The verified seal box forces traders to stop being sloppy. This isn't just a format. It's the early heartbeat of data organization. Historians still argue whether the first formal bureaucracies were born in Mesopotamia or developed independently in Egypt and the Indus Valley. But what no one debates is this. Mesopotamians took receipts to godlike levels. You pause to scratch your wrist. The stylus has been digging a groove into your skin. You flex your fingers, glance at the growing stack of orderly tablets beside you, and feel satisfaction. This is bigger than you now. Your records aren't just for reference. They're for comparison, for prediction, for spotting patterns in deliveries, for tracking who's late, who's cheating, who suddenly doubled their read output with no clear explanation. Receipts have become surveillance. You write slowly, carefully, spacing each wedge. You find yourself thinking in boxes. Categories. Chains of logic. This is what happens when you invent systems. Systems start to think through you. Someone sneezes across the room, and everyone collectively sighs. You've all been in here too long. The air smells like sweat, papyrus, and ambition. At lunch, you and the others slump in the courtyard, drinking watered beer and massaging your wrists. Tari breaks the silence. You ever think about what happens when people forget how to read these? You frown. Like in the future? He nods. What if one day someone finds all our tablets and has no idea what they mean? You stare into your cup. I hope they still remember goats, you say. Back inside, the head scribe calls for attention. He unveils a new proposal. Personal seals are to be cataloged. Every scribe, trader, priest, and delivery donkey, okay, not donkeys, must have a unique symbol logged in a master index. You're handed a blank tablet. Time to carve your name into eternity. You press your stylus carefully, designing a swirl with 3 wedges and a small triangle. Not too complicated, not too boring. Unique. Yours. It's your signature now. Suddenly, your name has weight. And here's where things get strange. That afternoon, a trader arrives with an unfamiliar symbol. It's elegant, precise. 2 curved lines crossed by a wedge. No name, no seal log. The head scribe narrows his eyes. Forgery, the trader shrugs. My grandfather used it. Thought I'd keep it alive. Now, there's a debate. Should inherited seals be accepted? Should they be updated? Registered? You sit there watching as a room full of grown men and women argue about branding. You get a wild thought. This is how heraldry begins. You imagine a world where families carry seals across generations, where kids are taught their clan's wedge pattern before they learn to walk. Ridiculous. Or maybe not, because you're seeing it more and more, receipts turning into identity. Not just what you owe, but who you are. That night, as you record the day's output by torchlight, you add something new to your copy of the master tablet. A small notation beneath your symbol. Standardized grain ledger compiled by Firam Beck. It's the first time you've included your full name. Why? Maybe it doesn't matter, but it feels important. Feels official. Feels like the beginning of authorship. Outside, a thunderstorm rolls in from the east. You hear the wind rattling the temple shutters and a distant slap of raindrops on packed clay. You tuck your tablets into a reed box, seal the lid with wax, and whisper to them as if they're living creatures. Stay dry. Stay true. Because now, your work isn't just recording the present. It's building the future. The rain hasn't stopped all night. By morning, the temple courtyard is a shallow lake, with scribes lifting the hems of their tunics as they tiptoe through puddles. You stand at the threshold with your stylus tucked behind your ear and a tablet under your arm, eyeing the sky like it's a rival trader who owes you barley. You've seen floods before, but this one's different, not catastrophic, just relentless. And that makes it dangerous in its own quiet way. The kind of slow disaster that doesn't knock buildings down, just melts evidence. Your first thought? The archives. You sprint across the courtyard, sandals slapping mud, heart thumping harder than any storm. The temple scribes are already inside, clustered around baskets of tablets, frantically moving them onto raised shelves. You join them, scooping armfuls of clay slabs and whispering apologies to the ones already softening at the edges. You cradle one in particular, a tax receipt from last month, sealed and signed, and just dry enough to be irreplaceable. You mutter to it, "Hold on, little one." It doesn't answer, but you feel better. The storm, it seems, has a message. Nothing written lasts unless it's protected. Tari appears beside you, soaked and wild-eyed. "We need a new system," he says. "For drainage?" you ask. "For backups?" He's right. You've always relied on clay's permanence, but now you're staring at your shelves and seeing fragility. Soaked reed baskets, mushy symbols, names slipping away like mud down a hillside. This flood won't be the last, so you do something radical. You grab a stylus and a handful of tablets, and you begin to copy. Historians still argue whether duplicate record-keeping began with fear of water, theft, or political manipulation. But here, right now, it's about survival. You carve twin receipts, log twin payments, note twin deliveries. Your fingers cramp, but your mind sharpens. You invent a new system. Twin tablets bound by symbol. One stays in the archive, the other goes to the recipient. You scratch a new wedge at the top to show it's part of set. A tiny loop, your own invention. It catches on faster than you expect. By midday, half the scribes are doing it. Loop copies, someone calls them. You try to protest, too late. The name sticks. You are now the accidental inventor of disaster-resistant documentation. Tari nudges you. You know what comes next, right? You raise an eyebrow. Storage houses. Entire buildings for records. Maybe two. You blink. Just for tablets? He grins. Why not? You want to keep receipts dry, don't you? And just like that, the future shifts again. From scribes to archivists. From recorders to librarians. Someone mentions building with stone shelves, double walls, waterproof clay pots to store the most important ledgers. You nod along while copying another trade agreement. This one about cattle that mysteriously vanished near the temple kitchens. Sure they did. You press your seal at the bottom and set it aside. But the rain keeps you inside longer than expected. And that means more time with tablets. More discoveries. You find one from years ago, written in a childish hand, barely legible. You almost toss it, then notice the name. Yours. It's the first receipt you ever made. A fake receipt for imaginary lentils traded to an imaginary god. You used to joke it was your divine tax payment. Now, it's faded and clumsy, but full of promise. You show it to a novice scribe. She laughs. You were bad at this. You smile. Still am. But you don't toss it. You set it on your shelf, beside your newest loop copy. A beginning and a present. By evening, the storm is easing. The air smells of wet earth and temple incense. A priest wanders through with a broom and declares the courtyard half pure. You go for a walk, stylus in hand. There's water still in the streets. Children floating reed toys. Traders complaining about mildew. But there's also something peaceful. The rain has cleaned the dust. The bricks gleam. The air is light. And your thoughts drift forward. The city's built entirely of record halls. To scribes with title hats and badges. To future floods and future backups. You look up at the darkening sky and imagine someone thousands of years from now digging up one of your tablets and squinting at your tiny loop symbol. They'll probably misread it, but they'll know you were here. They'll know you tried to save what mattered. Because that's what a receipt really is at the end of the day. Not just proof of a trade, but a whispered hope that someone, somewhere will care that it happened. And that's enough. You head home, tired but calm, tablet under one arm, and the soft sound of dripping gutters accompanying your thoughts. Tomorrow, there will be more trades, more columns, more loop copies, and maybe if the sun stays out, a dry spot to work in. Morning fog clings to the city like a thin blanket of hesitation. You stand at the threshold of a new records room, smaller than the temple archive, but fresher, more organized. It's part of the loop copy initiative, a whole separate storage space for duplicate receipts, and it's your baby. Well, yours and the 20 other scribes now calling it the clay nest. You didn't pick the name, but like all nicknames, it stuck. Inside, shelves line the walls, stacked with reed-wrapped bundles of tablets, each tag with a wet clay marker showing its category: livestock, grain, tools, taxes, oaths. There's even a new section labeled contracts of unusual nature. You walk past that one slowly. You know exactly what's in there. Remember the woman who claimed she traded 2 goats for a promise under starlight? Yeah, that receipt lives here now. You run your fingers along the rows of tags, marveling at the volume. This is no longer about single trades. This is about networks. You flip through a tablet stamped with seals from 3 cities. Each one confirming that grain traveled downriver, past 2 checkpoints, was weighed, taxed, and then re-weighed again after a sudden downpour. Historians still argue whether Mesopotamian trade was centralized through the temples or facilitated more by individual merchant families. The truth, you suspect, is both. Because these receipts, they don't just represent goods. They represent agreements, alliances, trust at a distance. You're witnessing the dawn of long-distance accountability. And with it, the emergence of logistics. Tari joins you mid-morning, arms full of damp tablets from the palace. We've been asked to compile a flow map, he says between grunts. Everything traded with Lagash in the last month. You blink. At what? A flow map, he repeats. Arrows. Diagrams. The official wants to see where things go. You rub your temple. We don't do diagrams. Now we do, Tari says, already spreading the tablets across a low table. You stare at them. Grain from Uruk, wool from Nippur, bronze tools from a city upriver whose name you can't even pronounce. You grab a bit of charcoal and start drawing lines in the dust on the floor. And suddenly, there it is, a picture of the past. The future of data visualization begins with dirt. You and Tari spend hours refining it. You trace the routes, add dots for markets, tiny triangles for temple checkpoints. You accidentally invent a key. You hang the whole thing on the wall like it's art. When the official sees it, he claps. Marvelous, he says. Now we need one for fish. You die inside a little, but nod. Because here's the thing. The world is getting too big to remember in your head. It needs visuals, symbols, summary. It needs receipts that show. You return to the clay nest, grab a tablet, and sit beside a wide window where the light slants across the clay like a blessing. You begin copying today's trade routes, thinking in patterns. The scribes nearby are arguing. Friendly, mostly over whether to color code their tags. Someone wants indigo for tax records. Another prefers red. Someone else suggests pictographs. You suggest, just draw a goat for goats. They all groan. But by afternoon, there's a tiny goat on one tag. You wander past a novice scribe practicing wedge symmetry, muttering don't lean under her breath. She glances at your tablets and asks, do you ever get bored of this? You pause. No, you say, but sometimes I wish clay was lighter. She nods solemnly. You pause at the tablet shelf again. One caught your eye earlier. A receipt for a shipment of dates, but the symbols are weird. Not just damaged, modified. A double wedge where there should be one. A new curl where it's not expected. You realize this is someone's personal code. Not official, not standard, but consistent. You smile. You've just found proto-encryption. Because people aren't just using tablets to share the truth. They're starting to hide it too. You flip through other examples, marking where traders altered symbols slightly to avoid prying eyes. One even embedded a riddle in the wedge count. This isn't just commerce anymore. It's language bending into secrecy. The sun dips lower, casting long shadows across the shelves. The clay nest hums with low voices, styluses tapping, laughter echoing between dusty columns. You step outside, breathing in the scent of warm clay and nearby stew. The air is clearer after yesterday's rain. Your sandals slap dry stone. You wander past the temple courtyard, where a child is scribbling lines in wet mud and proudly declaring them numbers. No one corrects her. That's how it starts. You return home, stretch your arms, and roll your sore wrist. You've written a dozen receipts today, solved 3 disputes, invented a map, found a cipher, and no, it's only going to get more complex. Soon, someone will start storing these maps, cross-referencing ledgers, filing contracts by date, by region, by seal design. Receipts are becoming records. Records are becoming archives. And archives? Well, they're going to build civilizations. It's barely dawn when the messenger arrives, panting, dusty, and waving a cracked tablet like it's on fire. This just came in from Kish, he gasps. You squint at the tablet, brush off the dust, and read. Crisis. Temple fire. Archive lost. Request duplicates urgently. You don't even get breakfast. By midday, you and a dozen others are hunched over a long table, pulling from backup shelves, copying old records, muttering curses under your breath. The clay nest's air is filled with the scratch of styluses and the faint smell of panic sweat. This is it, you think, the worst-case scenario. And weirdly, it's thrilling. Your loop copy system is working. Without it, the Kish temple would have lost everything. Names, payments, oaths, grain counts, who borrowed whose goat, and never gave it back. But because you had duplicates, history isn't gone, just inconvenienced. You mutter this like a mantra. Inconvenienced, not erased. Tari slides a tablet your way. You think they'll start making 3 copies now. You groan. Don't give them ideas. Historians still argue whether this moment, the growing dependence on backup systems, marks the birth of centralized bureaucracy or just widespread anxiety. Either way, today, you're part of the engine keeping civilization from forgetting itself. At lunch, someone proposes a clay tablet vault. Underground, fireproof, double walls, triple seals. You call it excessive. By sundown, you've agreed to draw the first draft. And here's the truth you're starting to feel in your bones. Receipts are no longer just transactional. They're existential. You're no longer just proving that something happened. You're proving that you remember it. That someone can come back days, weeks, years later and ask, did I really do that? And you can say, yes. Here's the clay. You copy a delivery record with a trembling hand. The symbol on it is unfamiliar, and you realize this is from your first year. Someone's been holding on to this for over a decade. They came to you to make a fresh copy because the original cracked in half. You remember carving it. You remember the man, nervous, young, missing a sandal. You smile. He still owes 2 jugs of oil, by the way. That's the other side of receipts. Memory with teeth. You pause to sip water from a chipped jug and then grab a clean slab. More copies to make. You wonder who will be reading this 10 years from now, or 100, or more. The room is quieter now. Everyone focused, heads down, backs aching. Across the table, a novice scribe raises her hand. How do I write duplicate of a duplicate? You don't hesitate. With a smile, she stares. In a double wedge. She carves it, then carves it again. A young boy, too small to scribe yet, watches from the doorway. He whispers, "Will they make tablets about us?" You glance up. They already are, because the act of recording becomes part of the record. People begin to track not just what happened, but how it was recorded, who did the carving, why it was copied. There are now tablets about tablets. One of your colleagues writes a full log of today's recovery operation. Names, times, outcomes. You suggest adding how many cups of beer were consumed during the chaos. She actually does it. Somewhere, far in the future, a researcher will chuckle over this entry and wonder what soggy barley mood meant. They'll never know, but they'll know you had one. You rest your head for a moment on your elbow. Just a moment. The clay is warm. The fire crackles. The scratching continues. The work never ends. When you rise again, the moon's out. You gather the day's copies and carry them to the new shelf labeled Reduplicated Urgent Response. You place them gently beside others, careful not to smudge any symbols. And then, without anyone telling you, you carve your name into the side of the shelf. Small, discreet, but there, you've earned it. Because today, you didn't just write receipts. You rescued memory. You protected a temple's voice. You kept people from vanishing. Tomorrow, the Kish delegation will arrive to collect the tablets. They'll bow awkwardly, offer thanks, maybe even payment. You'll wave it off, but secretly, you'll glow. Because you know what it feels like now, to matter because of what you remember. As you step outside into the cool night, you glance up at the sky and think. If someone carved a receipt for today, what would it say? A dozen scribes, one storm, 200 saved stories. That's not bad. You whisper it to yourself. Maybe someone will write it down. And then you walk home beneath a sky full of stars you'll never name, but always remember. You don't notice the quiet at first. You've been too busy these past few weeks, between archive repairs, the new temple vault plans, and some truly absurd debate over whether a trade of 5 jars of pickled radish counted as sacred or secular. Jury's still out. But now, sitting by the river with your stylus tucked into your hair and your feet dangling in the water, it hits you. The city has gotten quieter, not silent. There's still the usual clamor of carts and dogs and priests announcing the importance of barley. But something about the hum has changed. Calmer, smoother. You realize that when a merchant passes by, greets you, and taps the pouch at his waist, you hear the familiar clink of a tablet. He doesn't need to explain anything. The sound alone says, "I have a receipt." You nod. He nods. You both move on. This is new. Receipts have become commonplace, not just a formality or a priestly tool. They're culture now. You return to the temple just in time for a training session. New scribes, eager and nervous, chewing on reeds like it helps them learn faster. You walk them through standard phrases, trade notation, proper seal placement. One asks if she can design her own symbol. You smile. You have to. She beams like you handed her a star. Historians still argue whether this stage, where writing becomes part of identity and community routine, marks the birth of civil literacy. Others claim it's just social mimicry. People copying scribes because scribes seem cool. Either way, you're watching writing evolve from specialized craft to daily behavior. You see in the new market tablets. Gone are the dry ledgers of yore. Now they come with comments, delivered on time, or smelled funny. Some even include drawings, a smiling sheep, a squashed fig, a stylized beard. You find one with a doodle of what appears to be you. Or at least someone cranky, short, and surrounded by tablets. You're flattered. Probably. The temple decides to host a festival, not for the gods, but for scribes. It's modest. A few flags, some carved cookies, a reenactment of the first known receipt, featuring an elder wearing a goat mask. The children scream in delight. You pretend it's historically inaccurate. Secretly, you love it. That night, As the city dances and chews roasted chickpeas, you take a quiet walk through the archive. The torches flicker, the shells hum with history, and then you see it, your handwriting on a child's practice tablet. Sloppy, yes, but it's unmistakably your phrasing, your loop copy symbol, your habit of underlining names with a short dash. They copied you, not just your technique, your voice. That hits deep, because you remember when writing was hard, when the clay cracked too soon, or the stylus splintered, or your fingers cramped halfway through a shipment log. When no one trusted the scribes, when receipts were afterthoughts. Now, they're ritual. You close your eyes and try to picture it all from above. A city lit by torches and moonlight, buzzing with people carrying knowledge in their pouches, whispering their histories in a hardened clay. You remember an old tablet you saw once, forgotten, cracked, stuffed behind shelf. It simply read, "One sheep, no payment yet. Witness my mother." It made you laugh and cry, because in that one short note was a whole world, debt, humor, family time. And maybe that's what writing is in the end. Time made visible. The next day, a traveler arrives. She brings with her a strange tablet, thin, curved at the edges, unlike anything you've seen. The symbols are unfamiliar, but there's a rhythm to them. Her name, she says, is Idenanai, and she's from a place far beyond the marshes, where the winds curve and the gods have 3 heads. You host her in the clay nest. She teaches you to read a few of her signs. You teach her to make loop copies. She's horrified and delighted. She leaves 3 days later, carrying 5 tablets you made together. You keep one of hers, tucked in a red cloth. No one can read it yet, but you don't care. It's a seed. More travelers will come, with more symbols, different receipts, and the city will grow again, not outward but inward. More names, more records, more stories. And you'll be here, stylus in hand, making sense of it. As evening falls and the torches are lit once again, you take your favorite seat beside the temple steps. The breeze carries the scent of roasted garlic and parchment. You close your eyes and whisper the 3 words you've carved more than any other. Received in full. Because for now, that's how it feels. The mornings are quieter now. Not because the city has slowed, but because you have. You still rise early. Still walk the worn path to the archive. Still touch the shelves as you pass, like greeting old friends. But you pause more often. Listen longer. Speak less. The clay nest hums along without you needing to steer it. Scribes chatter over ink stains and tray gossip. Novices scribble practice wedges and giggle when their seals look like potatoes. You love them for it. Tari calls it the golden chaos. You call it peace, because something remarkable has happened. The work doesn't need you anymore, and that, strangely, feels like a victory. You sit by the window, stylus in hand, staring out at a city that has learned to remember itself. Traders enter the market clutching tablets instead of shouting arguments. Temple offerings are tallied before the ceremonies now, not after. Children sing counting songs that include real units of measurement. Even jokes have evolved. Your favorite? What did the goats say when the barley was late? I kid you not. It's terrible. You tell it constantly. And here's the thing, it all runs deeper than receipts now. Because somewhere along the way, those tablets full of numbers turned into stories. You see in the margins, scribes adding flourishes, mini narratives, tiny stick figure illustrations. Some even carved poems. You find a tablet in the archive labeled Trade Log, Westgate, but it's got more than trades. It's got notes about the weather, a sketch of a merchant's absurd hat, and what appears to be a complaint about a particularly rude goat. You smile. This is it, you think. The beginning of literature disguised as accounting. Historians still argue whether storytelling emerged from oral traditions or written records. Whether myths came before receipts or receipts quietly birthed myths. You now suspect they were never separate. A good receipt, after all, tells a tale. Who gave, who received, what changed, what mattered. One tablet you copy today reads simply, 3 bundles of reeds. From Ashur to Enlil, for the bridge that broke, so we can cross again. Poetry, unintentional, maybe, but real. That evening, as you stretch your sore back and crack your knuckles, you visit the temple garden. It's overgrown in places, fragrant with wild herbs and baked clay. There, on a low bench, you meet a boy, a new apprentice. He's holding a tablet upside down and frowning like it personally offended him. You sit beside him. Trouble, you ask. It's math, he sighs. Numbers don't like me. You nudge him. Numbers don't like anyone at first. He glances at your hands. You're Firebringer, right? You laugh. Once. Now, describe that walk slowly. He doesn't smile, just watches you like your statue. Did you really invent the loop mark? He whispers. You nod. By accident. He's silent for a while, then asks, do you think I'll make something that lasts? You think of a shelf where your earliest works still sit. The badly carved wedges. The time you misspelled fish as foot. You answer. If you're lucky, yes. If you're not, you'll still make someone laugh. That's enough. The boy doesn't respond, just turns the tablet right side up and starts again. That's how it happens. That night, you visit your shelf in the archive, your personal one, tucked behind the main records. It holds odd tablets, unfinished ones, personal ones, a receipt for a pot you never picked up, a list of names you once carved into clay just to remember how they sounded. You had a new one tonight. It's short, for dreams remembered, no payment required. Witness, the moon. You press your seal beside it and place on a shelf. You sit there a while longer, listening to the quiet. Because more than anything, you know this. Language holds what memory cannot. Sooner or later, the storms will return. The archives will fade. New cities will rise. New symbols will bloom. But someone, somewhere will find one of these tablets, press their fingers into the grooves, and wonder who carved it. And maybe, just maybe, they'll smile. Because they'll know someone was here, and they cared enough to write it down. Hey guys, tonight we're going all the way back to clay under fingernails, sandals on cracked stone, and the smell of warm dust in the air. You're a scribe again, or maybe still, and your world is small but meaningful. A tablet, a stylus, a transaction waiting to be recorded. You've survived markets, floods, temple politics, and 3 separate arguments over whether lentils count as currency. You've written enough receipts to tile a floor. But today is different. Today, you're cleaning up. Not your house, your archive. It begins innocently. A novice trips over a stacked bundle of tablets and starts a mini landslide of old contracts and misfiled ledgers. You dig through the clay mess and find records you forgot you ever carved. One for a goat lost to mysterious circumstances. Another listing trade debts for a man who vanished during the lunar festival. You realize your history is untidy. You decide to fix that. You gather old receipts, brush off the dust, and begin reorganizing by category, then by date, then by personal embarrassment. You find your first ever trade log, 1 wedge per word, all crooked, but still legible. The story of your life in fragments. Tari joins in, of course. He brings wine and judgment. You kept this, he says, holding up a misspelled receipt for 3 fish and 1 confused sheep. Yes, you say, it's a classic. Historians still argue whether scribes in ancient Mesopotamia truly understood the future value of what they were preserving. Were they just record keepers or accidental historians? You decide both, because as you work, something becomes clear. These receipts, messy and mundane, aren't just evidence of exchange. They're breadcrumbs back to who you were and who your people were. You laugh at the one where a woman demanded a refund on a sour fig. You pause at the tablet that marks your mother's final trade. You linger on the ledger that says, for the boy with the broken flute, knowing full well that boy grew up to outrun everyone in the city. You carve a fresh tablet for today, sorted 80 records, drank 2 cups wine, found self again. You seal it with your thumbprint, because now you know, even the act of remembering is worth recording. As the sun dips low and the scent of incense drifts from the temple, you gather a few of your favorite tablets and carry them outside. You sit by the riverbank, where reeds whisper in the wind and frogs grumble in the mud. You place the tablets on a flat rock and simply read them aloud. No one else is around. It doesn't matter. This isn't for proof or record. This is for the quiet moment when you say, we were here, we traded goats, we counted beans, we forgot names, and we remembered them again. You whisper the names carved in your oldest works. Some of them you haven't spoken in years. Some make your throat ache. Some still make you grin. You hold the last tablet in your hand, one with no wedge marks, just a faint thumbprint and a circle drawn in the center. You made it on a day when words failed you. It's still perfect. Back at the clay nest, you light a single lamp and hang your stylus on the wall. Not to retire, just to rest. Tomorrow, you'll write again. Maybe even invent something new. A new symbol, a better loop. But tonight, you've said enough. Because when the winds shift and the floodwaters rise and the clay crumbles into dust, someone will find one of your receipts and trace your lines with reverence. They'll say, this mattered, and that will be enough.